Modern spirituality is a lie. Nothing that is promoted in the media today about spirituality resembles even a fraction of what real spirituality actually is. Spirituality has been diluted, twisted, and repackaged into something that can be sold to the masses. And that is the irony, because the very discipline that was supposed to free you from this reality, from its rules, from its illusions, has been turned into the exact opposite of that. Instead of giving you space, clarity, and understanding, it traps you in new narratives, new identities, and new forms of control that feel spiritual but function like cages for your mind. So, with zero censorship and no sugarcoating, I am going to break down 7 clear signs that show what you are listening to fits the fake spirituality narrative. And pay attention all the way through, because the lies become more subtle and more dangerous as we go, and the last 2 signs are the most important and common ones people never realize they are trapped in. Sign 1. You focus on how spirituality looks instead of what it actually means to live according to spirituality. Here is the first red flag, and it is the most visible one. Modern spirituality has been hijacked from its roots. Symbols that once carried real meaning have been stripped of their depth and turned into aesthetic props. Practices that once demanded discipline and self-confrontation have been reduced to quotes, outfits, and online content designed to sell courses, crystals, and identities. And the crazy part is, it was not always like this. Words used to mean something. Symbols used to point beyond themselves. Spiritual practices were not about how spiritual you sounded or how you looked. They were about transformation. But today, spirituality has been reduced to costumes, clothes, crystals, tarot decks, and carefully curated personalities. People perform spirituality instead of living it. And here is the uncomfortable truth that the majority simply ignore. Real spirituality was never about any of that. It was never about looking divine, sounding peaceful, or about appearing enlightened. It has always been about one simple thing: understanding your own nature and the world around you more clearly. Not connecting to the divine the way it is sold today, chasing love and peace as emotional states, or pretending everything is beautiful and harmonious when the majority of the world are living in awful states. In fact, the point is not even to feel peaceful or loving at all. The real point is to question yourself so deeply, so relentlessly, that you eventually detach from your own emotional reactions. Because only when you are no longer enslaved by how you feel, you gain the ability to actually see the reality clearly. That is already uncomfortable for most people. And that discomfort is exactly why fake spirituality exists. And this leads directly to the second sign. Sign 2. Fake spirituality creates endless self-proclaimed gurus instead of people who build and act on spiritual ways of living in the real world. Fake spirituality produces talkers. It is easy to sit around all day talking about how peaceful you are, how aligned you are, or how much the universe loves you. But none of that has anything to do with spirituality. Talk is cheap. None of the enlightened figures that modern gurus constantly quote spent their lives sitting around repeating older teachings. They did not build identities around quoting others. They did not do one psychedelic retreat per year and declare themselves awakened. They lived spiritually their entire lives. They did not obsess over what other gurus were saying. They walked their own path, alone, with discipline and with consequence. Yes, they learned from others, but they never turned someone else's experience into their entire worldview without questioning it. And that distinction matters a lot. If you want to be spiritual, really spiritual, there is only one way: You keep questioning everything, including the things that feel comforting. Jesus was not executed for preaching love. John the Baptist was not killed for running a spiritual community. Moses was not chased because he quoted other prophets. They were opposed, exiled, and killed and chased because they challenged corrupted power structures at their roots. That is real spirituality. It has nothing to do with being calm or peaceful all the time. It has everything to do with seeing the truth as it is and acting on it even when it costs you everything. And most people do not want that. Which is exactly why the next sign appears. Sign 3. Fake spirituality avoids discipline and worships momentary feelings. This is where things start going wrong really fast. Most people's first exposure to modern spirituality and spiritual communities makes them think the same thing about spiritual people. These people are insane. And most of the time, that instinct is correct. From the outside, what you see is a group of people disconnected from reality, chasing synchronicities, signs, angel numbers, and imaginary confirmations from something or someone that they matter. They invent invisible guides, divine companions, or universal forces that love them unconditionally because it emotionally comforts them. And this is exactly why so many self-proclaimed spiritual people end up broke, detached from reality, unstable, or completely lost. That is not an accident. That is the outcome of replacing a discipline and way of living with feelings. Always remember this. Real spirituality has no room for belief. None. Zero. Because the moment you cling to a belief, you have already separated yourself from reality. If you claim you are one with the universe, yet you cling to a belief about it, you are already divided from it. Belief is separation. The real path is far more uncomfortable. You learn to understand every point of view without clinging to any of them. You learn to hold contradictory perspectives in your mind without needing to reject, ridicule, or demonize others. But remember that understanding does not mean acceptance. You analyze what psychological or emotional need each belief is serving for people, and then you let go. You cling to no identity or belief, no fixed way of being, because only in the moment you become no one, you gain the ability to become anyone. And that brings us to the missing sign that explains everything so far. Sign 4. Fake spiritual community treats belief as if it were direct experience and the truth. This is where the illusion fully locks people in. Imagine a world where no one has ever seen the sun. Not once, not even a glimpse of it. Yet billions of people swear by its beauty, its perfection, its warmth. They write books about it. They build identities and countries around it. They even start killing each other over whose interpretation of the sun is more accurate, even though none of them have ever actually seen it. That would sound insane, right? That is the modern spiritual and religious world. Endless lines of gurus talking about divine union, cosmic connection, and higher consciousness, while they have never lived or attained any of it directly. They do not know it. They believe in it. And believing in something does not make it true. People once believed the universe revolved around Earth. Belief did not make that real, did it? This is the core scam of fake spirituality. It replaces direct experience with belief. Real understanding has only ever formed one way, through direct experience. You cannot become a bodybuilder by believing in strength. You cannot become a chef by believing in cooking. You cannot become a painter by believing in art. and you cannot become spiritual by believing in spirituality. Anything you accept as truth without touching it yourself becomes borrowed identity from someone else, not real understanding. So here is the secret rule that destroys most modern spiritual systems. Never accept anything as your truth unless you have experienced it directly. Not because a guru said it, not because a book said it, not because it feels comforting to you. Live spirituality. Do not talk about it. And once belief collapses, something else immediately rushes in to replace it. That is where ego disguises itself as enlightened. And that is the next sign. Sign 5. Fake spirituality replaces truth with character costumes to please the ego. This is one of the most common traps, and also one of the most ironic ones. A seeker starts asking real questions. They feel the cracks in reality. They want answers and clarity. And sometimes, the moment they find a framework that fits their internal narrative, they stop searching. Instead of understanding the ego and loosening its grip, they build it a better house, a more spiritual outfit. This is why the modern spiritual world is full of self-proclaimed healers, masters, and guides who constantly talk about profound ego death experiences. And then, in the same sentence, tell you they are on a mission to heal the world. Stop and think about that for a moment. If your ego truly died, who exactly is on that mission? If the sense of me was gone, there would be no one left to save humanity, to fix others, or to claim spiritual authority, would it? That contradiction alone exposes the illusion. And when you question them, they do not respond with clarity. They quote, deflect, or even gaslight you. Because they do not actually understand what ego is. They think they killed it. In reality, they just fell into a deeper layer of it. This is the part most people miss. You do not become free from ego by trying to kill it. Nothing needs to be destroyed. Freedom comes from understanding, not killing. The moment you shine light on your own patterns, motives, fears, and desires, the ego naturally loses its grip through awareness. The real work is simple, but uncomfortable. Take a pen and paper and start questioning your sense of me. What do you believe about life? What do you believe about yourself? Who shaped those beliefs? What do you value the most, and where did that value come from? Did you choose it or inherit it? And then you keep going, deeper and deeper. The more you understand yourself, the less power the ego has over you, because you now see every trick it plays. And once ego loses control, another illusion shows up: pain. And fake spirituality does everything it can to help you avoid it. That is the next sign. Sign 6. Fake spirituality teaches you to bypass pain instead of integrating it in your core. This one is everywhere, especially in modern yoga and high-vibration communities. They teach you that pain, anger, sadness, and despair are things to reject, that anything uncomfortable is low vibration, that you should rise above it, ignore it, or replace it with positivity. And the moment you ask them what a vibration actually is, the conversation collapses, or you get a blank stare, or again, a quote from someone else. This is another form of self-denial. Just like ego, pain does not need to be fought. It needs to be understood. We are not a purely peaceful species. That is not an opinion, it is history. Humanity has been brutal, violent, fearful, and confused for most of its existence. Pretending otherwise does not make us better. It makes us blind to the truth. And this is why almost every genuine spiritual story includes a period of suffering. Odin hangs himself on the tree of knowledge. Buddha leaves the palace and faces reality as it is. Jesus is crucified. These are not aesthetic stories. They are symbols, symbols for me and you to learn from their journeys. They all point to the same truth. Awakening involves suffering, because seeing reality clearly is not comforting. When your eyes open, you do not just see beauty. You see exploitation. You see cruelty. You see collective pain. Reality stops being about your personal narrative and becomes about the shared human condition. And that hurts. But then something else happens. If you keep questioning, you eventually question your own pain. And you don't do it to escape it, but to understand it. You start tracing it back. Where did it come from? What belief created it? What fear feeds it? Pain stops being an enemy and becomes just purely information. And here is the part most people completely get wrong. They romanticize suffering instead of ending it. They tell themselves stories. This is divine planning. This is God's test. This is the universe teaching me a lesson. No, it is not. Stop turning pain into stories. You are telling me a divine intelligence created a planet where most people live in poverty, repetition, and survival just for some cosmic lesson? That suffering is man-made. And if you want answers, stop looking at the sky and start looking at systems, structures, and behavior. Do not make pain special. Do not make it holy. Be precise. Break it down. Understand it. The only way to move beyond pain is to integrate it so deeply that you know exactly where it comes from and why it exists. And once pain is no longer controlling you, something changes. You stop becoming passive. You start becoming dangerous in the best possible way. That leads to the final sign. Sign 7. Fake spirituality disconnects you from power and real action. This is the final lie, and it is the most damaging one of all. Modern spirituality has been marketed as passive, harmless, non-confrontational, and endlessly pleasant. A community of people who smile, avoid conflict, speak softly, and never disrupt anything. Real spirituality gives you power. Not imaginary power or symbolic power, real, grounded power in how you think, decide, act, and shape reality. Why does it give you power? Because when you see reality clearly, without belief, without identity games, without emotional self-deception, you stop being manipulable. And systems do not like people who cannot be manipulated. That is why fake spirituality teaches you to detach from action. That is why it tells you to pray instead of build, to retreat instead of confront, to just feel instead of verify. When you are truly connected, you do not need rituals to feel aligned. You do not need ceremonies to access higher understanding. You do not need retreats to touch something higher. Every second becomes a point of contact with reality. And here is a massive red flag you should never ignore. Fake spiritual people treat intuition as infallible, so they can avoid verification from others. Whenever you question their intuition, they become defensive. Whenever you ask for clarity, they gaslight you. Whenever logic exposes a contradiction, they dismiss logic itself. They say, "You think too much. You are too mental. You should feel more." Yes, you should feel everything. But feelings are just tools for understanding reality. They are signals, not the compass itself. Real spirituality does not reject logic. It integrates it. It does not reject emotion. it understands it. It does not reject action. It demands it. The goal was never to escape the world. The goal was to see it clearly enough to change it. So if what you are listening to makes you passive, dependent, identity-obsessed, emotionally fragile, or afraid to question authority, it is not spirituality. Be aware, because it is control wearing a spiritual mask. If you want something real, remember this. Do not believe. Do not imitate. Do not perform. Understand. And once you understand, act. If you enjoyed this content, let me know in the comments which points hit you the hardest, and which ones you want me to break down into separate videos.